In the previous video, we discussed pairing and also troubleshooting that paired connection and some of the different things that you can do as far as resetting the iPad, turning the Bluetooth on and off, and then making sure that your battery and that the board is still intact inside the Libra unit. If it has any corrosion or water damage, then it's probably time to replace or send that into repair. So the configuration is set up. All weigh bars and load cells installed on the grain cart must have identical rations of sensitivity and capacity. This is true if all weigh bars are of the same model and should be checked otherwise. So basically what this means is when you go to set up and configure, to calibrate, you have to have all weigh bars that are matching. So typically, if you get a kit from us, it'll be pre-calibrated and you won't have to worry about this step. If you have an existing system and it was working fine with the scale head, and then you add the Libra box to the equation, should be perfectly fine, and we'll also provide you with those numbers. So the information that you provide us on your scale system, we should be able to work through and get that set up for you. So the biggest thing here, we'll go in to the actual app now. We'll take a look at this. And where I'm at is I'm in the settings tab. Down at the bottom you see the gear wheel. That's blue. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the info key. We don't do anything with the disconnect as far as tapping on the rows or anything like that. I'm just going to tap on the info button on the right hand side, tap on that, and it's going to bring up cart name, display rounding, unload detection, minimum load, smoothing. Cart name, put in your make and model in there of your cart. That's the typical way to set it up, or however. The display rounding, so the bigger carts, probably the more you'll have it, or the more weight it'll be rounding off to. So that way you can get a little bit more of an accurate reading. Smaller carts, you can go probably in that 20-pound range. Medium size, 50-pound range. But if you get one of those larger carts where it's maybe 1,500 bushel or more, something of that nature, then you're probably going to want to up your display rounding on the increment size of how it counts. So it counts in 50, 100, 150, so on and so forth. Okay, so the unload detection, that should be turned on so that way the operator doesn't have to go through and manually save each transaction. So as the grain is accumulating in the field, you will see where it accumulates in the truck if you want to use that, and then after you push the empty key on the main screen, it will go and transfer the grain to the destination. So we'll go over how that all works. So the unload detection, typically you're going to have that on. The accuracy of that is phenomenal. It works great. So definitely have that enabled. The minimum load, sometimes I'll run into scenarios where someone will put it way low, down to like 1 pound. And that is something that you want to probably keep in that 1,000-pound range. So any transaction that's going to be under 1,000 pounds is not going to activate the automatic unload detection. So if you have a pretty smooth field, you could probably lower that. But typically on most transactions, or for the most part, you'll see that they're going to be over 1,000 pounds. Now, in some scenarios, you're just going to top the truck off and do it that way. So you could do an automatic save where you would just hit the save button on the main screen and do it that way. But the recommended amount is staying at 1,000. Also, moving on from that, the smoothing feature, you want to have that enabled. On the smaller carts, you can get away with some of those really smaller carts where it's less than 500 bushel, but even then I would still probably turn that on. There's just no perfect terrain. You're always going to run into different issues with topography. So I would say have that enabled. It's not enabled as a default, so once you pair, make sure when you name your cart, make sure that you turn that smoothing on. Basically, that balances out how it weighs, so that way it wouldn't jump from 0 to 10,000 pounds for some reason. If you hit a large bump, it's going to jump from 0 to maybe, I don't know, 400 or 500 pounds, let's say. And then with the automatic unload detection turned on, if you have the smoothing turned off, it would probably start recording different weight measurements and start recording random weights throughout the field. So the biggest thing there is if you have the unload detection turned on, make sure that you have smoothing turned on as well. And then from there, once we have everything pretty much to our liking, we'll push done. And then we'll move back to the main display, or I mean not the main display, but the pair devices. Then you can move to the main display. And if you look under the larger number and in between the smaller number, there's the auto display, and then that means that the automatic unload detection is enabled.